Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and growing up I had 3 mice as pets. That's right, Larry, Curly, and Mo. Okay, let's get into today's interview.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to the Beginner Photography Podcast. I am so happy to have you here listening to me today. This interview is, I'm just going to put this out there, it's a long one. It is a long interview, but it's full of so much great information. It is such like a really good conversation, which is something that I don't have as often as I would like. A lot of times the guests that I have on the show, their time is very valuable, and not that today's guest's time isn't valuable, but she was more open with sharing with me, and I just really enjoyed my conversation with her. So I'm excited to get into that. But first, I wanted to let you guys know, big update, right? This Flash in a Flash course, it is coming. If you haven't heard about it, Flash in a Flash course is going to be my first online course for you to learn how to use Flash. I mean, literally from the beginning. If you are a complete beginner using Flash, this course is going to get you started right away. From you have a Flash, you haven't even taken it out of the box, to taking really great dynamic photos with ease, essentially. So I'm still working on that, but it is coming out very soon. And if you're interested in the Flash in a Flash course and you want to know when it's going to come out, more details about it, be sure to sign up for our free 14-day video course, Photography Basics for Beginners, 14 Days to Better Photos. There you can actually sign up for it on the website, beginnerphotographypodcast.com. And in this 14-day video course, I love it. It covers such a great range of topics, like what the difference between a $5,000 camera and a $500 camera, getting started with manual mode, and even the one thing that will improve your photos immediately and costs $0. So, like I said, there's a ton of great info in there. Free video course delivered to your inbox every single day. Doesn't cost a penny, and I know that you're going to get a ton out of it, and I'm really excited for you to sign up. So if you're interested, head over to the website again, beginnerphotographypodcast.com, and sign up. So this interview actually changed direction about halfway through the interview. I had this idea of what I wanted the interview to be. I thought that it was going to be more about taking photos of children, portraits, tips like that, right? From somebody who she owns a photography business where she photographs families and children. That's what she does. So that's where a lot of my questions were focused, but very quickly the interview turned more personal, more about her family and my family. She's a podcast host, so she's used to asking questions, and it was interesting being kind of on the other end of getting questions, but I really had a great time, but I wanted to roll with it. I didn't want to turn the podcast into something that it wasn't naturally going to be, and this is where it went, and I'm so happy that it went in this direction. And I'm serious that this is a genuine conversation between two people, and you're going to hear that my daughter was banging on the door and yelling for me to get my attention while my wife must have went upstairs and did some laundry real quick or something. So there's a few moments in there where the audio, you're going to be able to hear that. So just forgive that. I tried to minimize it as much as possible, but it's life. If you got kids, you totally understand. So bear with me. I do apologize for that. But without any extra, we're going to get into this interview right now with Jenny Stein. She is the podcast host of the Family Photographer podcast, and if you've listened to it, you know that this is just going to be a great interview. So we're going to go ahead and get on into it with Jenny Stein right now. Today's guest will be a familiar voice to a lot of you. She is the host of the Family Photographer podcast, another podcast focused on less on the gear and technical side of photography and more of the legacy and the power of storytelling through the photos that you can take. She's from Pittsburgh, PA, and I'm sure that she's exhausted from taking care of her 5 kids who probably stayed up way too late last night watching all the fireworks. So I'm really excited to be talking to Jenny Stein. Jenny, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
That was an excellent introduction because, yes, they did stay up too late. We actually watched them downtown.
Oh, so downtown. I read on your website that you like to go down to the Point to watch fireworks, so I'm glad that I didn't add that into my introduction because I would have been a liar.
No, we do. We watched them. We watched them by the side of the road.
Oh, okay.
We were on a highway. We visited for the 4th. We went up and were with my brother and sister at a park. And then we were driving home and my husband timed it just right so that we would get on a highway. And what happens is when the fireworks start downtown, everybody who's driving, not everybody, but people who want to watch the fireworks stop, and the police kind of give up.
Of course, yeah.
So totally you could just watch, and my 1-year-old loved it, and they weren't too loud.
Oh, good.
So we had a great time.
I kind of had a similar thing happen to us last night, where we live in a subdivision that's across the highway from like a horse racing track, and every year they do a giant fireworks show,
nice.
Which is great because we can pretty much see it right from our neighborhood. So we walked over to the best point, which is it's actually a dead end in the neighborhood, right? No houses in front of you, clear view. This is perfect. Here we go. Fireworks started, and about 5 minutes in, a truck on the highway that's in between, that's dividing us and the horse track, must have had some sort of mechanical issue and pulled over on the side of the road, hazards going right in front of the fireworks. Everybody had prepared for this moment for so long, and just by, I guess, serendipity, it was just ended, so we couldn't see much at all. It was just everything on top of the truck. But that's hopefully a memory that the kids will remember forever. So, but regardless, I'm really excited that you're here. Like I said, I've listened to your podcast for a while, but I want to know, because I actually don't know much about this. I want to go back to the beginning for you. I want to go back to how you first fell in love with photography.
I was super lucky to have a childless uncle who noticed that he was an engineer, and he was like really into the gear. It's funny because, like you said, like I'm not a gear person.
Of course, yeah.
But he just loved like geeking out about and this is not digital cameras. So he just loved cameras, and I took an interest. I asked him more recently in the past few years. I said, one day he just gave me a camera and we went out and shot a roll of film. And then we went to he had a friend that had a darkroom.
Mm-hmm.
He had a photography business and had a darkroom. We went and we developed it. And then he got his 4x5, like a, large format camera out. He had several because he loved this stuff, and he would take me to photography shows. So that's how I started. And I liked it right away. And then I just spent a lot of time in the darkroom, and it just never really, interest never went away. That was all.
So if obviously, like you said, the interest doesn't go away, but how does that focus progress over time? Because you didn't stay a hobbyist. You didn't just stay somebody who was interested in cameras. You turned it into a business.
Well, into my podcast. I have my podcast,
yes.
And I have a small. So I do some portraits for people. I do different things for people, but the thing that really shifted, I did it through college. I did a lot of photography in college. And then I weirdly started being an elementary school teacher for 7 years after college, which was really fun, but it was not photography. But I was taking photos all along. Like I never stopped taking photos. Uh-huh. And then when my kids were born, of course, right?
Always. That's
changes
the inciting
things.
Incident right there, yeah.
Even if you're already into it, were you already into photography? Your kids aren't that old, so you must have been, yeah.
My whole life, but our family had a video camera, and my dad would never let me touch it. So of course, that was like, whoa, why not? I gotta get my hands on this thing. And one weekend I did.
There's a lesson to parents.
Yes,
right there.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, so you can never eat broccoli. I'm sorry, you can't do it. But one weekend I got my hands on the camera and I made like a little short film. I loved the process so much that I knew that I was going to film school. I wanted to be a cinematographer, loved everything about it. And then I just found that it wasn't as creative as a path as it is in high school when you're 100% in control. So I was lucky enough to find photography very early in life and just continue on this learning process ever since then. Like, it's been almost like 20 years, you know what I mean?
And so your oldest is 5, is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you were really a pro when you had your 5-year-old.
Yep.
Okay. But did it still change when you had kids?
Yeah, I mean, there were things that that I wanted to make sure that I captured, but I focused on like all the wrong things. Like, I gotta have, this. I gotta have like X amount of like different hard drives, separate everything from the kids. Got to set up like this iPhoto library, and I just tried to separate everything too much, and it turned into just too much of a hassle. It wasn't fun, you know what I mean? So it wasn't until I really gave myself restrictions and just tried to do everything as minimal as possible that photography really became fun with the family and for kids. Was it similar for you, or did you like really dive into the technicals and really try to make every image the best image possible?
No. With kids, you can't really do that, right?
Sure.
Because there's some situation you could try, and it's nice to have some great images. But I feel like with doing your family, it's really it's just different,
Sure.
As far as what you want from them and who they're for. There's just a lot of questions, you know, and I was just on vacation with my family, and it was interesting because I didn't take my camera. I have a 1-year-old and I love being at the beach.
Yes.
I love it. And so I could sit down there all day, and I don't really want to bring my camera down because salt water, sand, the whole thing. And a few years ago, I was kind of obsessed with trying to get photos at the water, and I'm not obsessed with that anymore. I just am like, it's so hard. And so I noticed that I did take some, but my feeling was I don't need to get a comprehensive set of photos from this beach vacation. I just need the general feeling. I want to get a few pictures of my daughter in that cute hat and swimsuit that she's wearing.
Sure, yeah.
There were certain things that I kind of watched the first few days, and I was like, oh, that. And then by Thursday, so this is like, if it's a week vacation, by Thursday, I felt like I did bring my camera down. It was a pain in the neck to have it at the beach.
Yeah.
Because I have a 3-year-old nephew who's super adorable and super active and like throws water and sand everywhere.
Ooh, yeah. I get it.
I just it was interesting that I think something about the 5th child has changed me as far as like, it is too much to have a camera down here too. And so that was over a week ago though, and I haven't had time to look at the photos from the beach yet, but luckily I recommend this to everyone, is have a sister that's great at photography too, because
let me just set that up real quick. Let me talk to my parents. Yeah. Right.
So fortunately, I have my younger sister super into photography. It's her 3-year-old, and that's a little like super fun and super crazy. And she took a lot of photos as well. So it was really nice that I kind of felt like that's kind of who I've been over the years. Like I talked to someone on my podcast once, and I was like, Erin, you are what I'm talking about, the family photographer, like the person that people expect to take photos. That's been me for years and years, but my sister got more into photography, and now it's really nice that I don't feel like I have to all the time.
Yeah,
we kind of share the load. There's 6 of us siblings, so I mean, there's a lot of family things going on. So anyway,
a lot of big families.
I don't even remember what question I was answering, but I
don't even really remember what question I asked either. That was like a really good path that we went on.
Right.
I guess I was kind of trying to figure out what was it that drove you past the point of point and shoot? Like what drove you deeper into learning more about the camera?
Okay, that's a good question. One thing, and I feel sorry for all these digital photographers. I started with a camera that was completely manual.
Yeah, okay.
And so I never had to be scared of manual. So
because that's all there was. There was no other option.
I didn't have another choice. So I still wonder, I don't know if you wonder this too, like something that I wonder is did you start with film?
I did, yes.
Okay. So it's so easy now. I'm like, why don't you just turn it on manual and see what happens?
Right. Yeah.
But people are afraid. They don't want to do that.
And it's so strange because it was
right?
so much more expensive with film to shoot in manual and mess up than it is now to shoot in digital and mess up. Obviously, it doesn't cost you anything extra, whereas it would cost you, $12 or whatever it would cost to develop an entire roll of film if it was bad.
Yeah. So, but to get back to your question, I mean, that is a question I have all the time. Like, nobody will do that. I've tried with new photographers. I'll be like, just put it on the M.
Yeah.
And find out what happens when you take pictures.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't work. So the thing that really shifted my photography for me is I got a digital camera. So that was a big deal. That was a big shift in my photography, was when I got a digital camera. And just because I could take more pictures again. And I hadn't been in the darkroom all those years, and getting a digital camera and being able to edit my photos was more like being in a darkroom again.
Right.
Because with kids, I would still love to get in a darkroom again, but it just doesn't make any sense. So I got a digital camera, and then about, I don't remember exactly how long, a year and a half maybe after I got my camera, my younger brother started a daily photo project, a 365 project, and he kind of pulled me along, and I didn't think about it. And that is the thing. And I feel like I say that to people all the time. They're like, what should you do? I'm like, a daily photo project for a year. Easy.
Right.
Have you done one?
No, I haven't. I tried a long time ago. I think it was about 2011. I tried. I really tried hard. But it was with my iPhone 4, I believe it was. So this was a while ago. And there was just something that I think I was too obsessed at the time with image quality that I would always rather have my DSLR, and transferring those photos from the DSLR to the phone. That's my problem. Like, I always try to complicate things way too much, and it's not even until it hasn't been until these past few years with kids that I've really learned to simplify my life. The simpler, the better. But right now, within the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, there's actually a daily photo challenge going on right now that started by one of our members, Carrie, and it's just been wonderful how much everybody has really been interacting and going on, and really, like, you can really see the progress and how these people are growing their photography. I feel like I really should step in there and do more of that, but I really haven't. I want to know, though, like, you said that you learned a lot from that 365 project, but when it comes to the actual like technicals, I guess, of photography, for lack of a better word, what was the hardest part for you to learn? Was there anything that took a while for you to grasp the concept, or was there anything that was like this aha moment where everything started to click for you?
I think exposure is a big deal.
Sure.
Like figuring out how to properly expose things, and then white balance is tough.
Yeah. With film, it's a whole lot easier because it's either, it's either a filter or it's not. It's balanced.
Right. Right. Yeah. So white balance still gives me trouble. And yeah, I think that also learning, I guess maybe it was partly because learning to expose film was really, from film is so much different than digital. But yeah, I would say that's a good question, but I think
it was just ingrained in you from a young age.
What's that?
The using a camera, so that it kind of became more intuitive than trying to tackle the whole process of it.
Yeah, I feel really lucky. Like, it is good that you asked me that question at the beginning. I feel lucky that I started when the stakes were really low. Yeah. And the other thing about if you started with film long ago, there wasn't like any posting on Instagram. People people telling you were better than you were before you were really very good. Like, it was just much more of a private process.
Oh, that's a good point.
And
that's really interesting to think about. You really got my wheels turning there. That's really interesting, because that's very true. Like, unless you brought out the photos to share, nobody would see them except for you and the technician developing the film, and that would make it a whole lot easier to make mistakes if you did.
Right. Yeah.
That's an aha moment for me right there, even though it's in the past and I can't learn from it, but it's definitely a realization for sure.
Yeah.
I love taking photos of my kids, obviously, right? Our kids are something that, I think every parent loves to photograph, they love to capture, to save. It's like a savings account, right? If you take that picture now, later you're going to be happy that you took it. When I take photos of my kids, it's very easy. They're very comfortable around me. I just, if they're going out and they're doing something crazy, I can just snap a few photos and I got it, right? And I like the photos and I share the photos online. Other people like those photos. They know that I'm a wedding photographer. And because I can take photos of my kids, they ask me to take photos of their kids. I have a very, I get the correlation, but I have a very hard time connecting with other people's kids, right? I'm a stranger. I'm telling them hey, laugh and have fun or whatever it is. How do you build a rapport or capture these genuine memories and moments of little strangers who are very questionable about who you are and what it is that you're doing with the camera?
That's a good question. I would say I still really enjoy more taking photos of kids that I know.
Sure, of course.
Okay, so those are my favorite. But when I do take photos of kids that I don't know as well, I just try to pay attention to them and talk to them before. One thing that's hard is that a lot of kids have been asked to look at the camera and smile from a really young age.
Right.
And that makes it really hard. I have a couple kids that I know that I see kind of often that it's just really hard because every time I take out the camera, they just make this fake smile. Then I have another family that I know, they have 5 boys. Their mom takes no pictures of them. She just isn't. I asked her, it was funny. She's someone who I asked, I was like, do you want me to take pictures at your birth? Because I love birth photography. She was like, nah, not at all. I don't want those pictures. No, thanks. And it was fine. She was so clear about it. But her kids are a delight to photograph because they aren't getting photographed all the time.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that the kids themselves are going to make your job harder or easier.
Right.
I think that depending on what their background is, like how many photos of how much they're asked, their parents ask them. I also feel like a good situation is when their parents aren't hanging around. When you're just alone with them and can be just talking to them, asking them. I often ask kids to tell me a joke. Sometimes the good picture is just them thinking about what to tell me. You don't really know, but it also gets them sort of comfortable with you. And I just feel like it's good not to ask too much of them and just kind of see who they are.
Right.
But I don't tend to take, I noticed when I was making a website because I recently finally made a real website just for doing photos for people. And it's all just portraits of kids. They're not all smiling. And I looked at it. I was like, oh, I guess I kind of love photos when kids aren't smiling. I feel like it's just, they're not always smiling. You know that.
Well, sometimes, but that's sometimes the stuff that you want to remember most. It's it's those hard moments that sometimes are the most impactful. I don't remember who you had on your podcast, but he's the guy who has tons of cameras, but he's brand agnostic. You said, do you remember
Aaron Thompson?
Yes,
Eric Thompson.
He talked about
great.
Photographing those really, really hard moments and how happy he was that he did so, even though he questioned whether or not he should do it at the time. And I struggle with that. It's like if I know that the kids are upset, I'm not going to pull out the camera because it just feels like an invasion of privacy, I suppose. Do you hear that? Do you hear this going on in the background? I'm just asking, can you hear it? Because I can hear it.
I can hear it. I'm sorry.
This is never.
You know what? I am the best person for this to happen with because.
And I'm so thankful for that. I am so thankful. She can just see me, so she's just hitting. She's just hitting this thing. Let me go restart SpongeBob or something. See,
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'll be right back.
It's fine.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
It really doesn't bother me at all.
This has only happened once before, and it was I didn't know this. My wife had like went outside to go get the mail, and the neighbor like decided to talk for like 20 minutes, and obviously the kids were in here trying to get my attention to hang out with them or something. So I apologize. Okay. See, this is the worst part, is that I always
I know
lose
that's
my
the
train
hard
of
thing
thought.
is you lose kind of the thread of the conversation.
Right. We were having a good conversation, and I wrote down some topics to talk about. Obviously, getting those genuine reactions out of kids. Right. We were kind of talking about that. People who you don't know. I kind of want to talk now then about has there been like one big lesson or something that you've learned that has changed the way that you have shot from something that you heard from one of your guests on your podcast?
Oh, all the time. So many things. It happens all the time. I talk to someone, like I talked to Zalmi Berkowitz, and I was like shooting wide for a while, and then I'm like, I don't like it. Yeah. And then it's hard for me. Or, I feel very influenced by the people that I talk to. I think it's really fun I think the thing I'm thinking about the most now, or something that comes up kind of, the two things I would say that come up in a rather constant way are the idea of our presence with our kids. And when is a camera taking us away from our kids?
Yeah. And
when is it letting us see them? And then there's another question, is we're seeing them? Are they feeling seen?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's deep right there for sure. That's a real thing.
Yeah. I think it's really important to think about. And so that's something that is just a constant thing that I'm thinking about. And it was really nice. I just last night when I was staying with my sister, my brother, were at the beach, and the light was, it was just a lake near Pittsburgh. It's not the real beach that we're just at, but it was like the light got real pretty. And I said to my sister, I'm like, my camera's here. Should I go get it? She's like, yeah, the light's beautiful. And then I came down, I took some photos, and what I realized is I was kind of having a better time without the camera. I was looking at the light on my 1-year-old, and I was looking at the way that she was splashing. It was totally beautiful. And then I brought my camera, and I suddenly noticed the woman in the orange pants behind her that I hadn't noticed at all before. You know? So, and then in that situation, like the beach, I go into, even though I do have insurance for my camera, I still go into like protection mode with my camera. And, so that's another thing is, when having your camera, especially if you have a camera that is a nice camera, you want to use it. It's a tool.
Yes.
You also don't want to
lose it because it's a tool.
Because, that whole thing about when to take pictures and when not to is the thing I probably have talked to a lot of photographers about, and also just thought about a lot over the time that I've been doing the podcast. And also then the bigger thing is, what are we doing with our photos?
That's where I was going next. Perfect.
I mean, when I talked to Andrew Helmich on he said, how do your kids look at your photos? And I felt pretty bad because I thought they don't really see them.
Why?
Not really.
Is it just because you keep them on a computer?
Enough. And I am printing more 4x6s now, but now I have to they're still 4x6s in envelopes. So I have to take the next step to put them in the albums like I used to do.
Yeah.
Back in the day. That was actually before kids. I made these great albums. They're super simple. My kids looked through them recently and were just laughing at like what we were wearing and how young we were. And It was really funny. But those are the kind of albums they should have, or I'm working on them having now.
Right.
But it's really hard. I just think you have to be really disciplined. And I'm not really that person. I have a friend who's really, I think they're just different personalities, right? Different people do things different ways. She's just like, well, every month I just do this thing where I go through my photos and I print and I do, and I'm like, okay.
That's funny because that's the exact tip that I was going to give you. Like, well, just at the first of the month, just go through all of last month's photos. But I guess it really depends on how many photos you take in a month.
Well, and also just, I wonder if the kind of person who can be like pretty happy having 5 kids is not the same person who on the first of the month prints their photos.
Right, right. I get that. But
do you know what I mean? Like, you have to be sort of like, take it as it comes if you're gonna be as nutso as we are.
Sure. I mean, I feel like our household is crazy with just 2 kids. I can't imagine how precious time is for you with having 5 kids. It's one of the reasons why I truly appreciate your time here today, because really you're just taking time away from your family. So again, I do appreciate that. But one thing that I started to do with the birth of our first son, so this was now 6 years ago, is Lightroom. In Lightroom, you can create books, right?
Yeah.
Now these are not the best quality books. They're just
you
made
do them through Blurb?
They're just made through Blurb. They're just printed books.
Great, though. Yeah.
And what I found is that by that progress was better than perfection for me, because if I tried to make everything perfect, it would take me an entire year to create this book. Where now, literally each month, I basically just take all the photos that I've taken through my cell phone, and all like my personal family photos that I take on, any camera, I just put into iPhoto or Photos, whatever it is now. So it's all in one place. And then I can just flag whichever photos I want at the end of the month. But for me, I really only take like maybe 200 photos of the family a month, which may seem like a lot to like, my wife, because she might take like 8. But maybe for somebody who's more focused or has more kids, focused on taking family photos, is that a very small amount of photos?
Well, it depends on kind of what's going on. I mean, I think that when I was doing...
Let's go with summertime. Activities.
Right now, I have not been taking that many.
Okay.
But when I was doing my 365, that would be a low number. Sure. Really low. I could easily take 100 a day. Sometimes at the beginning of the year, I probably took close to 100. By the end, I took like 15.
Oh, okay.
It's just interesting. You get so much better at knowing what you want to take a photo of.
Of course.
But I don't know how many photos I've taken. It'll depend on birthdays and holidays, things like that.
Yeah.
It just depends. And also, there's a bunch of different things. But I just think printing them is just a really big deal, and I am really working on. But the thing is, and you did film too, it used to be that we didn't have to be disciplined. It's just how we got our photos.
Yes.
There was no, and now we just have to be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's definitely a very big shift just in the change between film and digital, and not even just so through my Alexa went off there for a second. Not just through just the shooting, but even like the post processing and figuring out what to do with the photos afterwards. But I feel like I feel like even though we have more hurdles to get over, I feel like it's still well worth shooting digital now. But I kind of want to know what advice would you have for like a lot of the listeners to this podcast, maybe they just picked up their first camera at Costco, right? I get a lot of people who say, we got a kid on the way. I want to start learning. What advice would you give to them in terms of, I'm not even going to put a constraint on that question. What advice would you give them?
So someone that just went to Costco and picked up an entry-level camera.
Yes. With
a kit lens.
Yep. They got a kid on the way.
Yeah.
They got a full-time job. No plans.
It's just the first thing I tell anybody is to get a Nifty 50.
Oh, of course. Okay. Yes.
You have to get rid of that kit lens. Not because it's not a good lens, but because you can't learn with it. Because the aperture changes as you zoom. And you are never going to learn exposure that way. It's a pain in the neck. So get yourself a kit lens. I mean, not a kit lens. Get yourself the Nifty 50. Get rid of that one. And then I just would say, one thing I think people do is they think, I have this great camera. I'm going to get the camera out. And the first time I'm going to get it out is my kid's birthday.
So they're going to try to learn.
And then the pictures don't look any different than their iPhone because iPhone cameras are good.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So, and they're going to be like, what did I get? Why did I get this camera? It's not any better. I mean, so you have to take some time taking pictures of things, I would say start by don't even bother your children at first.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I mean, take pictures of, like, if you want to figure out aperture, get a piece of fruit.
Yeah.
Put it in a light but shady place so there aren't harsh shadows. And fool around with shutter speed and aperture and find out what those things are. There's so many resources. And while, you get used to it and we kind of feel like it's just so simple, after a while you can hardly even talk about it.
Yeah.
Because you're like, it's just to figure it out. But just give yourself time. Realize it's going to take time. That's the other thing. I feel like because we're used to the photos that an iPhone X will take, and it will make it'll put it in portrait mode, and you got your nice blurry background and everything, So everything is so kind of easy and quick, but there's a real reward to really learning it. And there is something, I recently photographed a wedding. I don't usually photograph weddings, but this is actually kind of a nice, I remember I said I was a teacher for 7 years.
Yes, of course.
One of the students who I had when she was 4 was getting married.
No, she reached out to you to shoot a wedding.
Well, she lives right across the street from me.
Oh, okay. So
it's not, I was still connected, and she knew I was doing, she knew about my photography. They go to the same church, so it was like a very familiar place for me. And it was wonderful to do those photos. Like, I'm not really a wedding photographer, but occasionally these weddings come and I start looking at these photos and I was like, oh, I'm so happy that Jess has these photos. But I had a dream at some point that I was trying to shoot a wedding with an iPhone. And it was a nightmare. I know some people do all kinds of things that I haven't taken time to learn how to make good photos with an iPhone. Like, I just take very basic photos with an iPhone. Sometimes, like, pictures of my husband, like, look at this at the store. This is how much it costs. Should we get it?
Yeah. That's having my camera roll as well. I get it.
I know, it's bad. But, so I guess have patience. Don't think you're going to figure it out. Did you learn to read in a day? No, you did not. So, like, have patience with yourself Rick Salmon was on my podcast. He said, just work on one thing. And I love that. A bunch of people, Steve Simon has said that. I mean, decide the thing you're going to figure out and work on it for a while, like I did with panning. I mean, I was obsessed with panning. And then the summer I was doing my 365 recently, I got really into water. Like, I just photographed water all the time. And one thing that if you're to the point where you're taking photos and posting them, here's something that happens is you start to worry that you're boring people. So, like I did that. I'd be like, oh, here's another water photo. Sorry. It doesn't matter what anybody else, like, work on your thing. And also be really careful with who you share it with. Don't just share it with the most critical person you know.
Of course. Or the
not
least
at the
critical.
Beginning, or the least critical, right? And also, if you talk to other people who, it's really nice if you happen to have friends that use the same camera that you do. I think it's really funny. I've told the story many times, but my younger brother, Joe, when I was getting my camera, I was deciding, should I get a Nikon? Should I get a Canon? He's like, so I live in Pittsburgh. He lives in San Francisco. It's a long way away.
It is, yes.
And I said, what camera should I get? And he goes, get a Canon. We can share lenses.
Just mail them back and forth.
I'm like, Joe, guess what? We share lenses. I mean, when he comes, it would just be funny. Like, we'd be at the beach together. But it also happened that one of my good friends here in Pittsburgh who does photography, she has a Canon too, and so she was going on vacation to Italy. I'm like, can I borrow some lenses while you're gone? And so that story about borrowing all those lenses from her, she's a wedding photographer and she's bought a lot of really nice lenses. And one thing I think that David Duchemin talks about, it's not about the gear.
Of course.
Here's the problem with that, is if you haven't had access to great gear, you don't really believe it. Right.
Yeah. That's a good one line phrase right there. That's absolutely true.
And when I borrowed this suitcase of L series lenses,
you were sadly disappointed. Sure.
No, it was fun. But I didn't suddenly think, now I'm brilliant.
Of course.
It was just like, oh, the bokeh's nicer. or this lens does this. What's hard about that is you have to have the experience. And I feel that when I talked to David Dushman on the show, I tried to get at that. I'd be like, yeah, but you have really nice gear. Right. It's easy for you to say.
All the time.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like, it's not really, it's hard. But I think you really do have to believe that it isn't going to drastically change your photography to get, at some point you're going to get a tool, a nicer lens, and you're going to be like, this is wonderful. I love it. But it's not really going to change the essence of what you do as a photographer.
Of course. That was a good quote right there. That's definitely going to be in the memorable quotes of this episode. So, I hear from a lot of beginners, obviously, that they, when they want to upgrade, they always talk about upgrading their camera bodies as opposed to lenses. I always advocate going for new lenses rather than upgrading your body. But right there, I want to hear your thoughts on that, just based on that last conversation you had right there about the power of lenses and how they won't dramatically change your photography.
Well, what I would say with the body thing is, now I have people who shoot with Fujis. Like, I talked to a lot of different people. I did use a Fuji for a while. I was going to start talking about full frame. That's why. And I remember I did a show and I was saying that full frames are great. And this guy wrote and he was like, blah, 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 blah. They're not that great.
That everywhere. Yeah,
anyway, I think full frames are great. Uh-huh. So I think it makes sense to buy an older full frame camera that's not going to cost you as much. And it won't have the greatest focusing, and no, it won't have... I use a Canon 5D Mark II. Mm-hmm. I mean, I haven't upgraded in a long time. I know, so old, right? And I also have a 5D Classic that is my backup camera.
Sure.
Which, thankfully, I haven't had to use recently. But that 5D Classic, so that's the first, I mean, that was, I don't know how old that camera is, but when I got that, so I had a crop sensor. I had a 40D. That was the first one I got. So it's kind of the mid-range one, right? And so I had that one, and then I got that full frame one, and I felt like those lenses, okay, here's the thing. Those lenses that you love are made to work best on a full frame camera. Mm-hmm. And you see all that cool stuff going on at the edge of the frame.
Yeah.
That does not happen on your crop sensor. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say about the body, but you don't need to go for all the bells and whistles on the brand new, whatever your favorite make, Nikon or Canon. You don't need the newest one.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with getting an older camera.
So
an older full frame camera body. And then as far as the lenses go, I don't own any L series lenses. I love them, but I'm not in a situation where I'm making a ton of money. Like, I really just work a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like I get prime lenses, and I like having them have a low aperture.
Mm-hmm. Of course. I'm interested to know what you would say about maybe somebody has a I don't know, a T6i or something, like a newer generation entry-level camera.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And they were looking to upgrade. I would say technically on paper a T6i is going to be better than a 5D Classic. Would you still recommend that they go that route, or would you say? I
haven't used one of those new ones. I don't. The focusing would make you bonkers on the old cameras. That's what you would really lose. That's a good question.
But I mean, really, it's about the aesthetics, right? Like, if we're talking purely about the aesthetics,
right? The thing. Okay, so I would say the 5D Mark II. I wouldn't go all the way down to the Classic.
Okay. I mean, I guess it's been a while. You can still pick up a Mark II for relatively cheap now, which still to this day is my favorite full frame body of all time. It just, the feel in your hand, the grip is, when I upgraded to the Mark III, I was actually sadly disappointed because the grip wasn't as deep as it is in the 2, and the Mark II just felt so much better in my hand.
What do you use now?
Fuji. I switched to
You're
Fuji. I love it. Yeah, shoot on
for weddings.
Yep. X Pro 2, and I love everything about it. I love. Because here's what it does for me. it's technically nowhere near as good as my Mark III was. I technically
When you
downgraded.
say technically, what do you mean?
Obviously, it's a crop sensor camera. The autofocus is not as good. I think that the lenses on the Fuji are better than Canon, but what it provides me is it kind of blurs that line between photographer and subject, because the cameras are obviously much smaller, and they just don't seem as intrusive to somebody. And when you meet somebody for the first time and are expecting to get meaningful moments of them laughing together and like true interactions of this relationship, breaking down that wall as fast as humanly possible is really important. And that's what this
I know
this does
Kevin Mullins says that people don't know that he's the photographer because he uses this.
It's because of his recommendation that I purchased a Fuji X70, which I don't have around me, but it's essentially a point-and-shoot camera with manual controls, obviously, and I've shot receptions with it, and I have also been confused as a guest at a wedding. I had a guy ask me if he knew where the photographer was because he wanted a picture of him and his wife, and I was like, yeah, man, sure, I'm right here, here we go. And I pulled out my camera, and he made this joke like, the camera that I brought is bigger than that camera. And it's like, okay, well, that's what I'm being paid for, you know what I mean?
They hired me, not you.
Exactly. It's funny. But, I mean, I love them. I truly do. It's it's a love-hate relationship, I would say. Definitely more love than hate.
People ask me what they should do. Like, it's hard right now because the Fujis are so good, you know? I just have people write me letters and be like, well, I'm thinking, what should I do? Should I get a Fuji? And I'm like, no.
And I always think that that's the wrong question. You know what I mean? Like what should I buy next? If that's the whole question, that's always the wrong question because there's not enough context.
Right.
You know, if you're a wildlife shooter, I would never recommend a Fuji to you. You know, I wouldn't even recommend full frame to you. I would say get a 7D Mark II or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It's so hard, but I kind of want to know. You mentioned there that you get asked that question a lot. What's another question that you get asked just all the time that you think is surprising, if that makes sense?
Oh, no, I don't. That's probably the question. They're just camera questions mostly. Mm-hmm. But I had camera questions. Mm-hmm. It's good to have somebody good to ask your questions to. That's the thing, right? I fortunately had family that was into cameras. Mm-hmm. And I had enough information, like my older brother told me to get that 40D. I would have gotten the Rebel at the time, even though I had enough money saved to get the 40D. Mm-hmm. He was funny because he knew about me that I wouldn't get at the time it would have been the classic, would have been the newest thing. But he knew I wouldn't do that. He's like, I know you won't get a full frame. Like I never buy the most expensive thing. But anyway, so I think that's probably people have questions about how to learn, which my answer is daily photo projects. And then the camera, I just always end up going back to it doesn't matter as much as you think. But you need something, right? And it was, the thing that my brother said when I was buying cameras that was good, and you touched on this too, is the idea that we focus so much on the body and really the lenses matter more. They're going to be with you longer. It's not like the older cameras that were really like little machines that weren't going to break. You know, they're computers. And just like your laptop doesn't last very long, neither is your body. Yeah. But the lens is going to matter. So if you want to spend a bunch of money on something, have it be a lens.
Yes.
That said, I mean, have you been... something funny that happens is sometimes you see people who somebody told them to buy the nicest lens. They don't even know what they have.
Yeah, I see it all the time, especially with the explosion and popularity of photography. Yeah. Like you said, people think that the best gear is going to dramatically improve the quality of their photos, and it doesn't.
Especially if you're going to like spend a bunch of money and then worry about carrying it around.
Oh, yeah. Then what's the point?
So for heaven's sakes, get insurance.
Yeah.
And even if you're if you're just a dad with your camera, but you spent $3,000 and you don't have $3,000 to replace that stuff with. You know what I mean? Like, don't stress about it. Talk to your insurance guy or girl or whatever and say, how much would it be to insure this? Is it covered under my homeowner's policy? Like, just have a conversation, figure out how much it is. It's not that much.
It's really not. I think,
and then you won't worry. Like, I know, I talked to my guy. Like, so when I had it at this park yesterday. I put my camera at the bottom of a bag with a bunch of towels. Someone could have stolen it.
Sure.
And I knew if someone stole it, the worst thing that would happen is all those pictures would be gone.
For the day,
The camera would be all right. The card would be gone.
Yeah.
I could replace the camera. So I think that's another thing that people don't think about. If they're hobbyists, they don't think about that until they're in business. But if you have saved money and you care about this camera, please let it be a tool and use it.
Yeah.
Get out there and take pictures wherever you are.
Well, I mean, photography, it is an investment. You know what I mean? Like, sure, the cameras are expensive, but man, I'm full of quotes today. Who was it? Somebody said, I think it was Jim Cramer. He said, the future is cheap if you pay for it now. Right. And that's where I think paying for insurance is really worth it. Because if something does happen, it's nice to have,
Yeah.
But I want to know, from you, what is one of the best investments that you've ever made in photography, whether it be money, time, or energy?
Okay, I have a couple answers for you.
Oh, good. Yay.
Okay, one is the podcast. Time-wise, I put a lot of time into it, but it's been wonderful. Like, as far as both having the chance to talk to really accomplished photographers and ask them questions, what it's like. It's really fun. And you just learn so much from them. Also, having connections with people like me who are photographing their family all over the world. It just makes you feel connected. That's one thing that's really great about doing the Daily Photo Project is you see different people all over the world and you're like, oh yeah, it's the same. People their kids are doing the same thing all over the world. And it just makes you feel really connected. So that is an investment I made. When I talked to Andrew Helmich, I talked about how the podcast hasn't been profitable, but it's been valuable.
Yes. Yeah. That's a very good point.
And I've really loved that. So that's one thing. The other thing I've done with my time connected to photography is for a time I volunteered with Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. So I was photographing four people when they lost a baby. And I'm not doing it now. I stopped doing it when I was pregnant. Mm-hmm. So
I bet that was really challenging.
Yeah, I just knew as soon as I was pregnant, I was like, I'm not gonna. I got a call when I was I got a call to go to a hospital when I think I was probably 16 weeks pregnant, and I was like, no, I can't do that.
Yeah,
like I just knew, and so that was good. It was really clear, and now it's too hard to get away, so I have to wait until the right time again because I didn't have a little baby when I started doing that. So so I did that for about 2 years. I don't know how many times I went, but as far as finding something. It was just very powerful to be someone who could, be invited into these really profoundly intimate places.
Yes.
And have something to offer. And it wasn't enough, but it was something. So many people couldn't do anything.
Wow. And
you could do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think if you can find something to do with your photography that takes you out of yourself and out of, am I a good photographer? Am I doing this and that? I absolutely felt like that was the most important thing. And I'm not associated with this, I'm not really doing it officially now, but there's connections that I have through, like I did photograph it was really joyful. It was a family who I'd photographed after they lost a baby, and then they asked me to photograph when a new baby was coming.
Oh, that's nice.
And it was just, I feel like that is a gift that photography has given me, is that it's made me, people have invited me, like I said, into really, really special places. And you too, I don't know if you think about this with weddings. I thought about this with that wedding I talked to you about with my former student. It's so cute. But really, when people ask you to be their wedding photographer, I mean, a wedding is a big day, and you are really a part of their day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I often say that as a photographer, sometimes I'm with the bride more than she's with her new husband.
Yes. It's crazy. I noticed that. I thought to myself, I'm like, I think I've been with them more than anybody at this party.
Yeah. And you're the stranger. Oh, well, maybe not in your case, but it's like in my case, you're surrounded by like your 100 closest friends and the stranger. It's very hard.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know where that was going, but those are so.
No, but you're right. Just talking about the power of photography and how you can benefit somebody else's life through what you can do.
And also one other lighter note is that we made a Google Photos album for my dad.
Oh, nice.
And it's so easy. And he has an iPhone, so he's 70-something, 72, 73, something like that. And so he's not like. He has an iPhone and he's happy. He likes using it. He needs some help from time to time, but he'll be like, can you get these audiobooks working? But that was so easy to do. And now anybody can add photos to that album. And we were at the beach together and he's just like, I see you guys taking pictures. I hope they end up in that album. And so that is something I think is great to do as a family, is to make an album that it's so easy just to put photos into. So
and you're just talking about like a shared, like the digital album, right? You're not talking about creating books or anything.
He's happy to just look on his phone. I mean, my daughter did something that it was a video of her in this competition, and he's like, "Where's the video?" And then you can just upload it. It's really nice, you know. And he's just happy.
Oh, that is great. It's again something that couldn't have been done with film, but it's incredible. I'm actually really excited because giving back through photography is something that I'm looking to do more of in the next coming year. Next week I'm having Colby Moore come on the podcast, and Colby Moore started The Giving Lens, which I don't know if you've heard of the organization, but they go to they find nonprofits who need like media or photography in like locations all around the world, and they partner with those nonprofits, and then they create a workshop around that. So like for photographers. So photographers.
It's a great idea.
Yep. Go
That's awesome.
to Tanzania or something to a nonprofit who needs help bringing fresh water to this community.
So you get a bunch of people who want to go to a workshop with this guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're like, but they're taking photos that these people need.
Yes.
And then they'd use the workshop photos?
Yeah, exactly. So they can
brilliant.
They learn photography, right? They learn a new aspect of photography. And this is like a week-long thing. This isn't just like a day or two, but I think that you only spend a day or two like in the location for these nonprofits, because when you have like 6 photographers shooting for a nonprofit, it's you're going to get a lot of photos. You know, you're going to get a lot of media, and then you donate those photos to the nonprofit, and then the rest of the time you're still exploring new places and learning new photography. So I'm really excited to have him on the podcast because it's that whole, like you said, you do have a gift, just knowing how to use a camera. And that's interesting because there's a lot of like natural gifts that people have, right? Yep. And there's a lot of people who don't think that they have a natural gift, but you can learn this gift through photography for a very low cost of entry. And I think that is what excites me most about photography and educating others about photography is that anybody can do this. You know, anybody can do this, and it's and just really create legacy, you know, something that's going to last for a long time.
It's so much easier than it used to really be. The people who shot the most film were the ones that were really good, and it's not true anymore.
Right.
Like it was like wedding photographers and commercial photographers were good in part because they just shot a lot so often. So much more. And now I do think it is a great time. I've said that a lot to people. I'm like, this is a great time to learn photography. And also all your settings. That's the thing that, I mean, all your settings are connected to the file. Because I used to be like, a picture would work. I'd be like, wonder what settings I use.
Yeah.
I said, I was not that person that was very good at like writing everything down. So it's great. You can look back and go, oh yeah, the shutter speed was a little too slow, or whatever. You can kind of really look back. It is a great time to learn,
So exciting. So exciting. Jenny, I don't want to take any more of your time. You have been so gracious with me and Parker, our daughter, obviously interrupting several times. I want to thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. You really have shared so much, and I know that our listeners are going to get a ton out of this interview, so thank you.
You are welcome. It was a delight.
Good. Can you let the listeners know where they can find out more about you online?
Sure. My podcast, The Family Photographer, you can just search that in iTunes or wherever, Stitcher. So The Family Photographer, and my name's Jenny Stein. And then the website is thefamilyphotographer.net.
Perfect.
I have an Instagram account and a Facebook account, but I am totally off them right now. So you can go there. You can look for either Jenny Stein. It's Jenny with 2 Stein on Instagram. But I just decided my podcast is for the summer on a break. Like I decided to take a break while my kids were off. And
it's
so
needed sometimes.
Yeah, it's been really nice. It's getting me kind of, the podcast was starting to feel a little like relentless and like a little bit of a burden. And now I think about it and I'm excited again. So
good.
Yeah, no, I'm totally excited about doing it. And so, but in connection with that, I felt like, oh, this is a good time to just not feel like I need to be on the computer. So
Right.
I'm not really doing that much over on those places. So just go to thefamilyphotographer.net and you can see the, and then also get on my email list because I actually do send emails to people,
Perfect.
to the people on the list. So that's the other thing to do.
Well, are you currently doing a 365 project?
Yeah. Oh, that's the other place. You can see my 365, just Jenny Stein on Flickr.
Perfect.
And I think there's probably more than one Jenny Stein. I don't know how to, you'll see in my,
I'll leave a link in the description.
I'll send you a link.
Yes.
I'll send you a link, but you can see I have 2 full 365s and then lots of other pictures there. And I'm not doing one right now. I started the year and I was all gung-ho and then it just got too busy. I feel like, it just got to be too much and I just needed to be honest about the fact that I couldn't do it right now,
Right.
even though I love it when I'm doing it and I feel like it's just great. I just was like, I just can't do it right now. So
It's realistic.
Yeah. I'm hoping I would like to get back into doing one, even if it's just a week every month or something. It's been really nice to have that connection with people. But yeah,
Sure.
Not at the moment.
Okay. Well, like you said, you'll send over that link, and I will be sure to put it and everything else that you talked about in the show notes of this episode. So, Jenny, again, you've been so gracious with your time. I just have to say once again, thank you so much, and I really appreciate everything that you have shared today.
Oh, you're welcome. It was really nice. Thanks for asking.
Of course. If you're listening to this right now, and I have a good feeling that a lot of you are still listening to this right now, I want to thank you. I know that this was longer than one of my typical interviews, but I truly enjoyed myself chatting with Jenny, except for those few moments where I had to walk away and, turn back on SpongeBob or, get Parker some juice or something. But I really did have a great time. And if you really enjoyed this interview, which I really hope that you did, because there might not have been a lot in here about like how to take photos or what exactly to do, but the conversation between us, I think, shed some great light on the bigger picture of photography, and kind of brought me back to why I wanted to start this podcast, obviously, which is for that reason. There's so much more to a great photo than just the camera that you use, the lens that you use. Obviously, like you heard Jenny saying there, you don't... what was it exactly? I don't want to butcher it. You don't know how, pretty much you don't know how unimportant good gear is until you've actually used it, right? Good gear, it is important. It's expensive. It's important. And it can do things that cheaper gear doesn't do, but it's not going to transform the way that you shoot or what stories you're trying to tell as a photographer. And that was definitely one of my biggest takeaways. So if you enjoyed this interview, and you want to hear more from Jenny, like she said in her podcast, she has, and she's the host of the Family Photographer podcast, which you can find on iTunes, anywhere where you find podcasts, or you can head over to her website, thefamilyphotographer.net. And also, I share bonus content every week from my interviews with guests, both in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, which you can head over to Facebook, search for it, and you'll find it right away, and through our Alexa daily flash briefing. And if you're not already listening to that, all you got to do is say, Alexa, launch Beginner Photography Podcast 365. And that's it. You're going to start listening to it right away. It's going to be part of your daily flash briefing. There's new content updated daily, like I said, from photo tips, photo assignments, history, these little extras from our guests, and even a little bit of business if you're interested in that as well. So I hope that you check that out. Again, thank you so much for listening to this interview. We will be back next week with another great interview. All right, until then, get out there, keep shooting, and stay safe. I love you all.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.